After beating Rutgers and Indiana back-to-back on the road without him, I think Kanye Clary is holding back this Penn State basketball team.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Penn State fans? That is right. You are Locked On Nittany Lions. Thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I am your host, Zach Seyko, bringing you all things Penn State sports. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Adam Sheetz is back, Penn State men's basketball insider for Penn State Com Radio. If you want to keep up with his work, you can follow him on X, formerly known as Twitter. And if you're not already, become an everyday or subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast for everything, the latest analysis around your favorite Penn State sports. We're talking men's basketball in this one. And after Penn State steals 2 road wins like this, difficult ones too, they don't perform well in Piscataway. And Adam, they haven't won in over a decade. Now that's broken. They haven't won since 2014 when Tim Frazier made a game-winning layup out at Indiana. And now they get 2 victories. And it makes me wonder, Kanye Clary is not present for either of these games. He's dealing with an injury. I understand that. It begs the question, is he the problem? And I'm not saying you bench Kanye Clary. I'm not trying to advocate any of that. Like he's the issue why Penn State isn't winning as many games to this point. But we only have a 2-game sample size. But with those 2 wins, I did not expect them to win these games. I mean, maybe they play them close, right? But Indiana and Rutgers on the road like this were tough competitions, and Penn State won them both convincingly without Kanye Clary, their best offensive player. But is he a liability in other places like defense? I think so.
I think it's a fair question to be asked right now. Penn State, they played really well, as you said. 2 very different games they played this week. At Rutgers, defensive battle held Rutgers to 46 points, was an ugly game. Penn State shot under 40% and won, so it was a great win for them. Just doing the little things, very gritty win. Double-double for Ace Baldwin Jr. in that game with points and assists. And then they go to Indiana, and they just shoot the lights out. Jameel Brown was knocking down his shot. Zach Hicks found his stroke from behind the arc. They shot the ball really well, especially in the second half, outscoring the Hoosiers by 19 in that second half to get the win. So it was total team effort, 2 very different games in the way they played. But you mentioned Kanye Clary being absent. I mean, that's one thing I looked. I said, I don't know if they can win either of these games without Kanye Clary. But they played really, really well team basketball. That's not saying Kanye's a selfish player. The style they play when he's in the game, and Coach Rhoades is coaching this style as well, is for him to attack the basket. Same with Ace Baldwin Jr. Ace Baldwin now able to move back to his natural point guard position with Kanye Clary out, so he's able to control the game with the ball in his hand 100% of the time instead of splitting that with Kanye Clary. They're both really good players, a dynamic backcourt, but it's hard sometimes bouncing off each other. We've seen NBA players like James Harden and Russell Westbrook have similar issues with that, just trying to figure out who's going to have the ball in all those situations. So it's very interesting to see. And defensively, as you mentioned, it could be a liability. This isn't anything against Kanye Clary's effort, but those are 2 very undersized guards in the Big Ten playing at the same time. So you get more size, more athleticism on the wing to be that second defender along with Ace Baldwin Jr. helps ramp up your pressure, and you can do a lot of different things defensively with the more size you have when Kanye Clary's out. It's a fair question to be asking right now. Again, it's only 2 games. I'm expecting Kanye Clary will be back on Thursday when they play Iowa. It was just a face injury. Don't know the extent of it, but Coach Rhoades said day-to-day on Monday, and now you're looking hopefully to have him back for the Iowa game at home. But it's definitely an interesting, maybe you have to figure out something to do with the minutes, stagger him, allow Ace to play more point guard and see what you can do. But Coach Rhoades going to have to watch the film and kind of figure something out to see how he can keep this team playing that well while adding in a guy who averages 18 points per game. And as you mentioned off the air, takes 33% of the shots.
And that's just it. When I say Kanye Clary is a part of the problem here, why Penn State's not playing better, it's because his game affects the system that they run. Is Kanye Clary bad at basketball? No, he's not. He's averaging 18 points a game. But there we have it. He's taking almost, if not more, a third of the shots, a third of the Penn State basketball shots in this case offensively. So because I've heard him, other people say, just fans say, he's a ball hog. Well, I mean, I don't know if that's schematics. Maybe they tell him to take 30+% of the shots. Who knows? But and I think there's more coaching involved here. I don't think Kanye Clary is saying, no, nobody else gets the basketball, but it is it's just too oversaturated with Clary and Baldwin. When Clary's on the floor, Penn State is one, in terms of the assist ratio, they never distribute the basketball. And I felt like that was something that was key in these past 2 games. They played so much more team-oriented basketball, and that's because Ace Baldwin Jr. is just more of a facilitator while getting his own, because he's able to use his defensive prowess to create his own shots by taking the basketball away, going in for a layup. Right, he had five steals against Rutgers, and it was crazy to think, right? I thought they totally flipped the system that, with Kanye Clary out, we're going back to like the VCU offense here because you have Kern and you have Baldwin running the show here, but there's still a lot of, Penn State element players and then the guys out of the transfer portal. But I think that's just the way Rutgers is. That was going to be a slow, methodical game regardless, because then they amped it back up against Indiana. Now, you said the shooting was a lot better, but pardon so, Adam, because the passing was better. The facilitation was better. And again, going back to the defense, Kanye Clary, I don't want to say is exactly a liability on defense, but Penn State's problem isn't offense. It's not scoring. It's allowing the easy basket. So when somebody misses their assignment and then you have to overcompensate here, Kanye Clary is guilty of that from time to time, where he's not sticking with his man or with his position, and then Penn State gives up an easy basket because of all the things they have to do to shift around and stuff. So I just wonder, do you do something? I'm not saying, again, I'm not advocating you bench him, but for someone who's averaging over 31 minutes a game, do you maybe scale that back a few minutes just to give you a change up in this case? Go to that slow, methodical offense and maybe do some things differently to throw the opponents off.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some things Mike Rhoades can do here to bring Kanye Clary back, get all the good things you get with Kanye Clary, while also maybe kind of keep some of the things you've seen in these last 2 games when Kanye Clary hasn't been out there that we have not seen throughout the season. You can maybe bring him out early, put DeMarco Dunn in for him, let Kanye sit. Then maybe Kanye Clary comes back in, and Ace Baldwin, who played 40 minutes in each of the 2 games this week, was an Iron Man for the team. Maybe he gets some more added rest because Penn State now will have Kanye Clary coming back, and he can man the show while Ace gets a well-deserved rest. But when you talk about the defense, Kanye Clary, he's being asked to guard a lot bigger guys. He's 5'11", and Ace Baldwin's taken mainly the primary ball handlers as a point guard. So any 5'11" guards that are left in the Big Ten, that's who Ace Baldwin Jr. is normally getting that matchup. I mean, Kanye Clary's guarding the 2, which is a bigger guy, normally a shooter, and he's trying to help off. So I think there's definitely some stylistic things defensively that Kanye Clary, I think, is trying to adjust to. But I think, as you said it, Zach, there's definitely some things Mike Rhoades, Coach Crispin, the staff, they got to look at, Coach Martelli, and try to figure out how do we bring Kanye Clary back, because he's a guy, he's the best offensive player on the team. You got to bring him back in and still be able to keep everyone playing the way they've been since he's been gone.
Basketball fans will recognize this name. I liken him to Cam Thomas of the Brooklyn Nets. Thomas, on any given night, could give you 40 points. He's a guard, went to LSU, a talented basketball player, but he is a defensive liability, man. And I think that you mentioned the mismatches. I think Kanye Clary is getting too tough an assignment at points in time. It's just the mismatch, and teams notice that, and they're going to exploit it. It's the same thing last season and the year before when Penn State just didn't have any height to guard the bigs in the Big Ten, and teams knew that, and they took advantage of it. Zach Edey, all the rest of them. But Penn State still kind of has that problem outside of Kudus Wahab. And I thought that Indiana, this is a matchup nightmare. Kello Ware is just going, and he did. He showed up. He lit the box score up, but they were able to overcome it without Kanye Clary. So it begs the question here: do you make some serious adjustments when these 2 things? You won your first Big Ten road game, period, at Rutgers, and then back-to-back at a place that you hadn't won in a decade. What I'm saying is not crazy here. You just have to ask the question, does it make sense to adjust Kanye Clary's minutes, or maybe, do something different? Because what you have Ace Baldwin Jr. doing at his natural game is working for you. It's translating into wins, most importantly.
Yeah, as you said, it's translating into wins. So Penn State's going to want to keep playing this way. Now, that could be simply Kanye Clary is going to come back. The good thing with the schedule right now is they played Saturday, don't play again until Thursday. So they got a lot of practice time. Hopefully, if Kanye Clary is going to be able to go on Thursday, we don't know. We're assuming he is because Coach Rhoades said day to day when he talked on Monday before the Rutgers game. He said day to day, and he's been out 2 games. So hoping to get him back on Thursday. You have practice time to really kind of bring Kanye Clary in, try to tell him, hey, this is how we're playing now. This really start to work for us these last 2 games. The guys are playing confidently. We want to stick with this. So here's how we're going to try it. And maybe Kanye Clary can come in and adjust to the way they're playing and really buy into that role. Maybe he's not a guy who's going to go out and get you 20 points a game, but maybe he's going to get you 12 and just be a good piece on the floor because he's a threat. You have to deal with him. You have to be ready to help. And he can be maybe a decoy at times a little bit instead of trying to be that first primary scoring option. So a lot of options for Penn State to go into for this game against Iowa on Thursday. Hopefully getting Kanye Clary back and trying to figure out how they make that mesh with how well the team's played without him, and then bringing him back and trying to get that threat offensively back on the floor.
Coming up in the next segment, a little more big picture stuff, as this team is not getting enough respect, and it never did. All the experts, Adam, said that this team was going to finish in last in the Big Ten. They're 1 game under 500 and about a half game to a game for jumping up into the top 5 of the Big Ten standings. Mike Rhoades isn't getting enough credit either. Fresh off of an A-10 conference championship and making it to the tournament. So this team was always going to be competitive to some degree. We're going to discuss that more of how they can still be competitive down the stretch coming up on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or the resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And the Locked On Podcast Network is making history. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Remember, if you want to keep up with more Penn State basketball outside of this show, you can keep up with Adam on X, formerly known as Twitter, for all the latest news and analysis there as well. Penn State hasn't been getting enough credit to this point, Adam. I mean, beginning of the season, preseason, and even when the coaching change had happened, it felt a little late in the process, right? There's only how much recruiting you can do, but the transfer portal allows for this, to have these makeshift teams overnight and still be relevant, competitive. But that's what's the most impressive part here. Mike Rhoades gets into Happy Valley late, is able to recruit good players from VCU, good players on other parts of the college basketball sphere, and then retain some of the key basketball players. Kanye Clary, I criticized him a little bit in the first segment, but he's still an asset to this Penn State team. That's why they don't have as many problems on offense, because he can do what he does. He's able to create a shot, and he can get to the basket at will, and he's scoring 18 points a game. That's pretty good. But do I think the defensive system needs a couple of tweaks? Absolutely. And we know that Kanye Clary isn't just doing enough defensively, which is why it warrants those criticisms. But Mike Rhoades, the fact that he's able to take all these different games, what Kanye Clary does, what Ace Baldwin does, what Caduce Wahab does, Zach Hicks, Puff Johnson, DeMarco Dunn, and they're 5-6 at this point in Big Ten play. I know what people are saying. Well, 5-6 isn't that great. Nobody expected them to be under 500, just under 500 at this point. Nobody expected them to even probably get this many wins in Big Ten Conference to this point. Penn State was always going to be a second half type of team, just because the chemistry was going to develop over time. But Mike Rhoades deserves a lot of credit for getting into Happy Valley late in just the basketball cycle, the way the basketball season is, the off season, coming in late, getting players from scouting and getting the right players to complement what he wanted to do in his first system. And the fact that they're this competitive, when the experts, Adam, the experts said that Penn State was finishing 14th in this conference, and now they are a half game to a game to jumping up to the top 5 of the standings. And Mike Rhoades is not getting enough credit for what he's done with this makeshift team in one off season, in 3/4 of an off season.
Yeah, it's extremely impressive. I think the most impressive thing was this week. I mean, this team, after that tough loss against Minnesota, had every right to hang their head, maybe even quit. Like, the season's not going our way. We're probably not going to make the NCAA tournament. We're 9-11. What are you going to do? And then you win back-to-back games on the road. You play the way they are. That's a credit to coaching. He kept these guys bought in. He's playing a style that gets these guys opportunities to be successful, and they've done a great job in their last 2 games. So a big credit to Mike Rhoades, who was a phenomenal coach at VCU and proven that in the early going here at Penn State. So it's a lot of great things to be happy about. They're not Michigan. You look at Michigan right now, who is last in the Big Ten, who a lot of people thought were going to have a pretty good season. I mean, they've really just kind of packed it in on the season. They're blowing double-digit leads left and right in the first half and just not showing up in the second half. Their second half point differential is an insane number to look at. And it's tough for Michigan when you look at that. But Penn State, they're staying bought in. He's got guys. He got an interesting group coming in. He mixed it up, getting some sophomores, juniors, seniors, and then some grad students from the portal to have some veteran leadership, as well as some guys that are going to be able to stay with the program and build that up. Keeping Jameel Brown and Kanye Clary and Demetrius Lilly, who played really, really well, especially over the last few games. You got to be happy with what Penn State's doing right now and the projection of the way things are going. This team, they have a lot of life left in this team. These last 2 wins bring life back into the program after, a week ago we were talking about the tough loss to Minnesota. Now we're looking at them and how well they're playing. It's going to be interesting to see how they can keep it up, but very impressed to see how Penn State's playing, and Coach Rhoades deserves a lot of credit for that.
Well, and that's an excellent point too, because dropping a game like that, that's the Thon game.
Yeah.
That has more emotion to it than just a Penn State men's basketball game. Like, that moment transcends because of everything that's involved with the theme of the game too. The greater cause, right? What Thon does and everything. And you drop that game, and it's not like that was a back and forth game down the stretch, but it shouldn't have been. And that's an opportunity to say, man, I can't believe we lost this. And now we got to go on the road to a Rutgers team that's they're not as good this year. And they're probably looking towards the future as well with the recruiting class they have coming in. But you win that game, especially when you don't traditionally perform well in Piscataway. And you certainly haven't performed well at Indiana in a decade. Seeing the highlight of Tim Frazier, man, with I don't want to call it grainy, but the not as high definition broadcast. And I'm like, whoa, this is a throwback here. And Penn State gets that bit convincingly. They didn't win on a last-second shot like they did 10 years ago with Tim Frazier. They won convincingly against Indiana. They won convincingly against Rutgers. Those were games. Penn State's a 7-point underdog roughly in both. It was like 7.5, 6.5, right? But roughly a 7-point underdog in both of them, and they win outright. It seems like Penn State responds very well when they come off of a devastating loss. Because remember, they took Maryland to overtime, and then they go into that Ohio State game. They're down by double digits in the second half, and they win outright. They come all the way back. So this team, the fact that there are so many competing elements, and I don't mean to say competing in that way, but you have to take everybody's skill set they have never played basketball together before outside of Kanye Clary, Demetrius Lilly, and Jameel Brown. So you have to take all these different types of players, chemistries, and put them into one system, and they've all bought in. They could have packed it in after those kinds of games and allowed losing streaks to build. And they don't. They don't. Because losing that Minnesota game, I was weary that going on the road back-to-back like that against better Big Ten teams, it's like, man, I don't know. This might spiral out of control, and then they got to find a way to manufacture some wins in mid to late February if they want a shot, if they want a chance. But now they've set themselves up really nicely going into Iowa and then down the stretch of the rest of the season.
Yeah, they put themselves in position to be able to reach their goals, which I'm sure, I don't know about the NCAA tournament. You never know the resume. You have the loss to Bucknell. They're going to hold that against them. They're going to have some losses. It's going to be tough to win those resume conversations if we're talking NCAA tournament. But right now, if I'm Penn State, I'm focused on the Big Ten tournament. You can put yourself in position to be a good seed in that tournament, be able to compete, maybe get to Saturday of the Big Ten tournament. That'd be huge for this program to get to the semifinals after the championship last year, really kind of continuing the excellence playing in the Big Ten tournament and getting you momentum going into next year where not all the teams are going to be in the Big Ten tournament when they change the format to only 15 of the 18 are going to be in starting next season. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Penn State can finish. They have a winnable game at home against Iowa. You look at the momentum coming into this game. They're going to have an opportunity. Iowa's got momentum as well coming off their win against Ohio State. So they've got some momentum coming in. So it's going to be a really tough game for both teams. Going to be high scoring. Iowa scores as many points as they want. Usually they're going to run up and down. Penn State's going to run with them. Going to be a fun game to watch. Then they go to Northwestern, a tough game against, Boo Buie, and they're really good at home in Welsh Ryan Arena. They're a real tough team. And then back at home against Michigan State on Valentine's Day. So you talk about 3 games at Penn State. If they can get the Iowa game, that's 3 in a row. You have momentum going to a Northwestern game where you competed with them very well at home. They had a really tough game down the stretch, were unable to pull it out, and then getting Michigan State at home. Michigan State dominated that first matchup, but Michigan State's been up and down. They're really riding a roller coaster. There's a lot of chance that Penn State could turn this 2-game win streak into a potential 5-game winning streak in February, and they're going to be a team nobody wants to see if they get those 3 straight and get to 8-6 in the conference.
Adam, I think that's a perfect segue. In the upcoming segment, let's talk about Iowa a little further and then look ahead at that schedule to see where Penn State can they put together that winning streak that does set them up a little better going into the Big Ten tournament. Unlike last year when they really had to put it all together in the final 5 games of the season, can they set themselves up nicely going into March? That's coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Happy Super Bowl Sunday to all who celebrate from FanDuel, the #1 sportsbook in America. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snack, and placing some super bets. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W, or 2, or 3, maybe even more. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. You can bet on player props if there's anything that you like. The lines have already been there. Patrick Mahomes passing yards, Christian McCaffrey rushing yards, Travis Kelce receiving yards, all of that and so much more. And right now, new customers, when you join today, you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more is a winner. It's that easy. It's that simple. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And remember, if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast for all the latest analysis around your favorite Penn State sports. Football, wrestling, men's basketball, men's hockey, recruiting. Talk about it all here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And in this final segment, a look ahead as Penn State's schedule doesn't get any easier, but it's so close in the Big Ten. They got Iowa this upcoming week, not the Caitlin Clark-led Iowa team. Thank goodness, because that's one of the best teams in college in the women's basketball right now. But Penn State is going up against an even match, I would say, because Iowa is coming in 5-6 in conference, right at the big. Penn State with a win, and you need some teams to lose, but they could vault themselves up into the top half of the Big Ten standings if everything goes their way. But you got to continue to keep winning games. And Adam, as you mentioned in the previous segment, the Hawkeyes like to score. So they're going to get a shootout in this case because Penn State's identity this season is not closer to the VCU. It's this guard-centric, Kanye Clary can score at will. Ace Baldwin can score at will. I want to see the ball facilitated a little more. And Iowa does but Iowa's always been like that. Just thinking back, a little further to Luke Garza. They just play fast up-tempo basketball. They're not as concerned with defense. They try to outscore you. That's just the name of the game. So 2 identical systems going up against one another. It's just a matter of who can do it better this time around.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really interesting matchup. It's all going to come down to turnovers. Iowa cannot turn the ball over if they want to win this game. Penn State needs to force turnovers and get easy shots. They're going to be able to run with them. Iowa's going to want to run up and down. The one way to stop them is if you force those turnovers. I remember it was a top 25 game, very different teams, but back in 2020 in the Palestra, when Penn State and Iowa played each other, Penn State forced a bunch of turnovers, over 20, were able to win that game down the stretch with Lamar Stevens and those guys. Again, very different teams, but that's what you have to do. You can turn Iowa over, and if you do, you're going to get breakouts and you're going to get shots, and that's what Penn State has to be able to do in this game. It's their identity. They've done it so well. They did it to Rutgers. They did it at times against Indiana without Xavier Johnson. They were hurting to find a ball handler. They can do that again, get those turnovers, get the runouts. It's going to be huge for this team. And then for Iowa, protect the ball, try to run it up, and then get the shots they want. Penn State has had some trouble in transition defense at times. I thought Iowa's going to want to attack that, get the ball out of the net right away and go. So we'll see how Penn State can handle that. It's a very interesting matchup. Going to be super fun to watch. If you're just a college basketball fan, you'll want to watch. A lot of points are going to be scored, and it's going to be a fun matchup. But Penn State, there's a recipe for them to win this game, and it's not different from what they've been doing all year. And I think that's going to be the big thing Mike Rhoades going to preach to his team. If we do what we do, we have a great opportunity to win at home against Iowa.
They return to the Bryce Jordan Center, so that's great. You get the momentum, because I thought it was going to be stifled by losing. Again, you blew a double-digit lead to Minnesota. Minnesota's better this year, too. So it's not like they lost to a bad Golden Gopher team, but it's the fact that you were up by 16 points early in the second half, and then you end up losing that game. You go on the road. But now the momentum is back. The momentum's there. So you return home, and this is a team that is going to challenge you. They're going to continue to test you just to find out, because how good is this Nittany Lion team? Nobody cares about moral victories here and there. It's everybody cares about, is Penn State going to get into the NCAA tournament? And Adam, if you ask average Joe on the street, if you ask the average Penn State basketball fan, if you ask the diehard Penn State basketball fan, you're going to get a resounding no. You are. The fact that I was even speculating, saying hey, they're getting, because in the offseason, you can watch the previous episodes, I said they had elements of being able to make the NCAA tournament despite losing Micah Shrewsbury, despite losing some of those, Keba Jai, the recruiting class that was going to come in, right? High profile recruits all went to Notre Dame, and Notre Dame's not doing so hot. Besides the point, but this is about Penn State. So for Penn State, and everyone, last in the experts, last in the Big Ten, they're just definitely, and then everybody else said, okay, I think this Penn State team is, competitive, but they're not going to make the NCAA tournament. They're not even close, but they're not far away either. They're not. If they can continue to build, the key is continuing to build the chemistry, because I think they found something. Indiana, I don't want to say wasn't a winnable game, but come on. Overcoming the mismatches against a player like Ware. Indiana's at home. You struggle on the road environment, and Penn State was able to do back-to-back road games and so I think they found something. I hope they can capitalize on it, because if you make some adjustments, just play winning basketball. I understand that the offensive system complements Kanye Clary the best, but if you're going to be able to win games 60-55, I say scrap it. Run the old VCU system if you have to, because Ace Baldwin and Nick Kern respond better and further ahead than maybe this, the up-tempo, get Kanye Clary involved, because it takes things back away from that defense. It also benefits Kudus Wahab. It benefits Puff Johnson, guys who aren't as agile, and then you can keep those guys longer on the floor. You don't have to overcompensate for anything. I'm not saying go, slow all the way to 30 seconds, but maybe can you combine the best of both worlds and throw other teams off?
Yeah, I think that's going to be really interesting, especially for this matchup because of the way Iowa plays. If Penn State can somehow slow the game down, that's going to get Iowa off their rhythm. If Penn State can play two different styles where they're going to play pressure defense, try to get turnovers and layups, but if you don't be able to get those turnovers, maybe take the ball up and take your time and work to get a good shot. There's definitely opportunities for this team to do that, and we'll see how Coach Rhoades wants to do it, because it's one best thing. If you're a coach right now, you're looking at it and you're saying, we can play this way and win, we can play this way and win, and we have options here, and we just go with what maybe is working that night. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they draw it up here on Thursday night against Iowa. And I mean, it's going to be a great game, and they're going to have an opportunity to get a big win in the Big Ten and put themselves in position to compete for a great seed and be on the top half of the Big Ten heading into the Big Ten tournament.
If Penn State's going to get any accolades this season, whether that's, like you said, top seed in one of the top seeds, one of the upper seeds in the Big Ten tournament, making the NCAA tournament as an at-large. I don't know that I think Purdue's going to win the conference tournament and take that automatic bid, but this is truly the toughest part of the schedule. Going up against Iowa, then you're at Northwestern, as you mentioned, Michigan State, who embarrassed them, an improved Nebraska team on the road, a ranked Illinois team, a revenge game from Indiana's point of view, on the road at Iowa, at Minnesota, and then finishing up with Maryland. So if Penn State is able to get anywhere, they will certainly have to earn it. There are no gimmies for the rest of the season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no gimmies in the Big Ten. Penn State's a team that's very comparable to a lot of the teams in the Big Ten, but they got to play up and they got to play great. They don't. Coach Rhoades said after the Rutgers game, they don't have a team of just full out so much talent on the roster that they're just going to go and beat teams just off talent alone. They got to work. They got to execute the game plan. Coach Rhoades and his staff have done a great job formulating game plans to give them opportunities to win, especially early in games, getting off to great starts. They're going to have to keep doing that if they're going to win these games, because you cannot get down. They were down big against Indiana and able to come back, but some of these teams, you get down on Iowa, they're able to start getting you rolling. Their style gives you opportunities to get back, but it also gives them a chance to really get going. So you don't allow Iowa to get that confidence. Same with Northwestern and Michigan State. Penn State's seen what they can do if they get going early as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see, but definitely opportunities. You said they got to earn it. I mean, they hurt themselves with the resume, the non-conference loss to Bucknell, lost to Georgia Tech. You had some tough losses. You went 0-3 down in Orlando for the ESPN Invitational. You got to find a way to get those wins back if you're going to try to give yourself a resume for the NCAA or NIT tournament, trying to find an opportunity to play postseason basketball. And it's going to start by winning these games in the Big Ten and starting to build up that resume that's really taken a hit early in the year.
Always great to get that insight and that expert analysis from the Penn State men's basketball insider himself. That's Adam Sheetz. Remember, you can keep up with him on X, formerly known as Twitter, for more news and analysis outside the show. If you're not already, become an everyday or subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Let us know what you think about this Penn State men's basketball team down in the comments section to continue the conversation. Adam, thanks so much for the time again, as always.
Yep. Thanks, Zach. Always a pleasure.